Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight in our webinar, which is about reopening Hopkinton Middle School. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate your time and hope that you find this presentation informative. I'm going to start with the people that are here tonight joining us. First is Katie DeTommy, my secretary and tonight's host. Chris Ocampo, who is assistant principal. He is in his first year. He's joining us from Framingham High School. Both Anne Benbenick and Chris Ocampo have been an integral part of our reentry task forces, working with subgroups and getting things off the ground. So Chris, in his first year as an administrator, has hit the ground running and is doing an outstanding job. I'd also like to introduce Anne Benbenick, who is in her 8th year as assistant principal here at Hopkinton Middle School. She is a former English teacher, brings a lot of scheduling expertise, and has been knee-deep in working in schedules, working with our guidance counselors, as well as with us, and trying to have us ready to go for the first day. My name is Alan Keller. I'm principal here at Hopkinton Middle School. And as I said already, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. And we certainly appreciate your time. Our goal tonight is to communicate our actions for opening our doors to HMS staff and students. And of course, when I talk about our doors, I'm talking about the physical ones here on the property, as well as our doors to those of you whose children are going to be in as part of our elected remote program. We're going to answer questions as best we can at this time. I'm going to tell you, and you'll hear me say it multiple times tonight, we are figuring out a lot of things. We're certainly thankful that we have an additional 10 professional development days this year, because as administrators and as teachers, we are still working on a variety of things. And lastly, our goal is to share suggestions. So to hear from you improvements or areas not yet addressed. And, as administrators, as educators, we're doing this for the very first time. As parents, as those of you who have jobs outside the home know, everything that you're doing has changed changed dramatically as well. So we appreciate your patience, and we understand that this year is not going as certainly years past have gone. So we thank you for your patience. So I want to talk about a few principles tonight as we go along. We're planning for something none of us have ever experienced. Your children, our students, are the first group of students who have ever experienced a pandemic and school being affected in this way. So we ask for your questions. We appreciate your questions. We certainly appreciate any criticism or any questioning of some things that we have. We appreciate any ideas that you have. And that's something that's always been the guiding principle at Hopkinton Middle School, is we never think that we have the perfect answer. We always look to our students, staff, and parents as a community. And our goal is to make Hopkinton Middle School the best middle school in Massachusetts and in the country. And so that takes the community to do that. So please share with us those thoughts and questions you have. I do want to ask that it be done in a respectful way, that we move forward. And so in some cases, we are still working through some things, and hopefully that you can share some patience with us in that regard. I do want to talk about what ifs. A lot of questions that came in on the Google Doc and Google Form had, what if this happens, what if that happens? So there's a couple things I want to say to that. Number one, I certainly am not an expert in public health. So there's a lot of people that we're going to rely upon as the school year goes along. So our goal tonight is to talk about what Hopkinton Middle School will look like in terms of the learning experience, as well as the physical plant. When things come up along the way, we're going to work with our team here, and that includes obviously Dr. Kavanaugh, our assistant superintendent, Jen Parson, the school nurses, along with the nurse leader, Kathy Bain, buildings and grounds, and Board of Health. And so I'm going to, a lot of the what ifs, like if this child becomes a positive COVID case or of a staff member, we are going to, I'm going to hold off on a lot of those what ifs and just really focus on Hopkinton Middle School and what exactly it will look like in the fall, which it certainly is feeling that very fallish tonight. Our agenda for tonight is we're going to present information and open up for discussion in the following areas: teaching and learning, special education, health and safety, facilities, and schedule. And the way we're going to structure this is I'm going to go through each topic, or we are going to go through each topic. And then at the conclusion of each topic, we'll talk about the questions that you have that you submitted to us ahead of time. And then also there is the Q&A feature within Zoom that you hopefully found at the bottom of your webinar screen that you can click on and ask a question there. Chris Ocampo and and Ben Menick are going to be monitoring the question and answer session. They have the option of answering the question directly, so in typed form, or bringing it up to us and talking about it at the webinar. So that's how we're going to manage our time together. I really want to talk about focusing on Hopkinton Middle School. Hopefully you've had an opportunity or at least seen. If not, it is linked in here, and we'll share this slideshow tomorrow electronically. But if you haven't seen the district return to school plan, there is a lot of information in there that may answer a lot of questions that you have. We did disable chat, or at least it's my understanding that chat is disabled. It's my experience that chat can be pretty distracting and will prevent us from being focused on what is happening in the moment. All right, so we're going to get started. So that's a little bit of background. I think it's important to start with vocabulary because we've gotten a lot of emails and a lot of questions about my child is on the green team, my child is on the orange team. Just so you know, those of you who haven't been to Hopkinton Middle School before, we have teams at each grade level in grade 6, 7, and 8, and they go by colors. So for instance, in grade 6, we have a red team, a yellow team, and a blue team. Grade 7, aqua, silver, and purple, and grade 8, orange, white, and green. And so there's been a lot of confusion around this. So I just want to make sure that everybody understands the terminology and that we are operating from the same place. So to start, students at HMS will be in one of 4 tracks. You are either in the green hybrid group, you're in the green hybrid track, you're in the orange hybrid track, you're in the elected remote track, or you're in the on-site everyday track. Students in green or orange hybrid tracks are placed into cohorts, and those cohorts will consist of 9 to 12 students, and those cohorts will be together all day long. We will still have teams as we have in the past. So you could, for instance, have a child who is in 8th grade who is on the orange team, but is a green hybrid student. So I just wanted to make mention of that because I think that can be an area that could be confusing. Also, before we get started, I want to mention one other thing, and that is that tonight and what we're going to be talking about is a lot of what we're talking about is going to be focused on the students who are going to be here in person in the school, because that's where a lot of the change will be. It is not to say that we're not focused on our students who are elected remote. I think a lot of what we'll talk about tonight with elected remote will be applicable, but we are going to certainly be a lot centered on what the experience will be like in the school, because that is going to be dramatically different. All right, so we're going to start with our first topic, which is teaching and learning and what the school year will look like. If you haven't already seen the district calendar, it is on the website and it has been color coded so you know which days are orange and which days are green, so you can, for your planning purposes. Our first day of school is Wednesday, September 16th. And that will be in person for our green hybrid students and our on-site everyday students. And our students who are orange hybrid and elected remote will have their first day, and they'll be doing it from home. There has been a lot of conversation, a lot of questions around, can I change from hybrid to remote or remote to hybrid? The dates for those changes are as follows: October 12th, December 1st, and February 1st. And we ask that you honor the request made dates that are in parentheses there. There is going to be a substantial amount of scheduling, shuffling, and reshuffling for those changes. So that's why you see a substantial amount of time between the date that you requested and the actual change to that track. As for the classroom teachers, all students in Hopkinton Middle School will have an HMS teacher. Nearly all of our teachers will teach both elected remote and hybrid tracks. Elected remote students will meet with their teacher each day. Hybrid students will meet with their teacher on their in-school day, obviously. And hybrid students will have work to complete on their at-home day, but they will not be meeting in person, or they will not be meeting with their teacher remotely on that day. So I'm going to start right into homeroom, and I'm sure you might be saying, why aren't we talking about arrival and dismissal? We will, but I feel like that might be a little bit distracting. So I want to start with what the experience will be like once a student enters homeroom, and then the conclusion of teaching and learning, we're going to talk about what arrival and dismissal will look like. So our homeroom period is different this year. For those of you that have had children in the middle school before, homeroom period will be for 19 minutes, and it will begin at 7:20 and run until 7:39. Students will be going directly to their homeroom, where they will bring their backpack and their jacket if they have one. we will not be utilizing lockers. And this also will come up later, but we're not using lockers in the locker rooms either. Announcements will begin at 7:35, and the first period of the day will begin at 7:40. Classes will be 45 minutes in length. Again, that is a substantial difference from our schedule in years past. Teachers will be rotating their classrooms. So earlier I talked about cohorts. So students will be in a cohort of 9 to 12 students. And at the end of the first period, say I'm in a science classroom first period, science period will come to an end, and the science teacher will leave and go to his or her next cohort, and then the English teacher will come in. Related arts classes will be in a 6-week rotation. And again, for those of you who have experienced Hopkinton Middle School in the past, know that in the past, when a child would go to related arts, he or she would go with an entire grade level, whereas this year it will be done by cohort, and that is the related arts teacher coming to that cohort. Physical education and music are going to look substantially different this year. So again, it's the physical education teacher and the music teacher coming to the classroom. For PE, if students are going to be outdoors and without masks, they must maintain a 10-foot distance. If they are indoors and using our Doyle gym, they must maintain 6 feet of distance with a mask on. And if they are outdoors with a mask on, they must maintain 6 feet of distance. We have minimized or eliminating shared equipment. And as I mentioned earlier, we will not be using locker rooms. Instead of band, chorus, and orchestra this year, and this is one of those difficult decisions that we've had to make, those classes will be replaced by music literacy. Band, chorus, and orchestra are not permitted inside. And in order to be outside, we must maintain 10 feet of distance. So, in terms of weather and spacing, we don't feel like we can properly and safely execute band, chorus, and orchestra. And we recognize that that is a loss for our students. It is certainly a disappointment and loss for our teachers. But in the time that we're in, we feel like that is the decision that is best for our students at this time. All right, so I mentioned earlier, we're going to talk about arrival and dismissal. So first, I want to say that we are going to be sending formal arrival and dismissal plans to all families on September 8th. So what you're seeing tonight gives you a general overview of what arrival and dismissal will look like, but it is not a final plan, as we aren't talking about specific locations. We are still going to have a conversation with Dr. Kavanaugh, with the other schools that are impacted by our dismissal and arrival, as well as the police department. So students arriving by bus will arrive, as they typically have, between 7 and 7:15, and those students will report to the auditorium. In our auditorium, Mr. Ocampo and Laura Chatton earlier today roped off seats, and they are at 6 feet of distance. So students will have different sections of the auditorium depending on their grade level, and they'll be roped off at 6 feet of distance. From the auditorium, those students who have come via bus will report to their homeroom at 7:20. Those students who are being dropped off by parents or older siblings, those students who are walkers or bike riders, will enter through the Brown Gym Water Tower parking lot doors. Those doors will open beginning at 7:15. This is an important difference, again, for those who are HMS alumni. In the past, our doors opened at 7 o'clock. This year, they will open at 7:15. Again, this is a staggered arrival. You'll see a staggered dismissal when we talk about dismissal, but it is important that we maintain that 7:15 entry point for drop-off walkers and bike riders, because those students will be reporting directly to homeroom. So they will enter through the Brown Gym Water Tower parking lot doors, and they will walk in through the school and go directly to their homeroom. Again, I need to say it, dismissal is not a final plan. Here, what you're going to see here, we're going to send that final plan on September 8th. So for dismissal at end of day, if a child is riding the bus, he or she will leave the classroom at 1:50. Those students who are being picked up by a parent or older sibling, those students who are walkers or bike riders, grades 6 and 8 students will leave the classroom at 1:42. Grade 7 students will leave the classroom at 1:50. Again, going back to my earlier statement, this is a staggered dismissal in a way to avoid a lot of students in one particular location. Our grades 6, 7, and 8 students will be dismissed from different areas. And again, that's going to be part of what we communicate on September 8th, as we still have to work out some final details on arrival and dismissal. So I'm going to jump in now to some of the questions that were submitted ahead of time. Again, I know Anne and Chris have been monitoring the questions that have been coming in live tonight, and so we'll get to that after we complete this part. So if a family makes a change to the track that the child is in, will it be like starting all over? So in most cases, it will be a new class that the child will be assigned to, and it most likely will be a new teacher that he or she is assigned to. That will be a Hopkinton Middle School teacher, but it will not be a new curriculum. And I'll say this at least one more time tonight. Our goal as educators is to make sure that our curriculum is similar, whether you're hybrid, elected, remote, or if you're here for 5 days. So the curriculum will not be different. We have the same goals and objectives in our curriculum. So that won't be a change. Having said that, in order to minimize the sharing of materials, an English teacher, one English teacher in grade 6 who is working in person with students, may be reading a certain novel because we only have so many novels. And if that child moves to a different class in a different track, that class might be reading a different novel. And so that's something that as an English department, we've had conversations about, and we'll continue to converse about how we manage those kinds of changes, but there will not be a new curriculum. Will there be homework? That's going to vary class by class and by teacher, as it always has been. And so you know that certain subjects have more homework, and so that will vary as it has in the past. How will students on the remote track get their materials? So we are still in the process of planning for that, but there will be a pickup day before the first day of school. Will students on the remote track be on a team? Yes, they will. They will be on one of those teams that I mentioned earlier, whether it's grade 6, red, yellow, or blue, or in the other grade levels. We will still maintain our team structure that we think is very important at the middle school. Having said that, teams will look very different as they have in years past, given the fact that cohorts are staying together all day. Will students on the remote track have one teacher for all subjects? No. At the middle school level, beginning at grade 6, we shift into content experts. So just like any other HMS student, a student in the remote track will have their content teacher. So a science teacher, an English teacher, a math teacher, and a social studies teacher, and not a language teacher in grade 6. Will there be an activity block as there has been in years past? There will not be an activity block. Instead, they will be replaced with mask breaks, which we'll talk about later when we take a look at the schedule. Can students store supplies in their classroom? So this is a not clear answer here, but we think, and this is one of those things where we're still trying to figure this out. So one of the things we have to balance is related arts teachers coming into the classroom and students working on a project. So let's say Mrs. Willinger is working on an art project. Depending on what that project is, will students have to keep that project in the classroom? We believe that students can keep their supplies there, and that is our goal. If we learn that it's getting too crowded in that classroom and we're not able to maintain the right amount of distance, then we'll have to recalibrate that. Will we find out our child's cohort prior to schedules on September 8th? Unfortunately, no. We are still, and when I say we, I mean mainly Mrs. Ben Bennick and the guidance counselors, are still working frantically on schedules. We've had to make multiple changes, multiple variations as we've gone through this process. So as much as we had a goal of having this done, before the start of September, it looks like we're going to be working really up to that deadline. Are all grade 6 students hybrid and remote receiving Chromebooks? Yes. Pickup for students, and again, this will come out in a formal communication from me, I believe, next week. But pickup for students on remote and orange track will be on 9/15, so September 15th, that's before the first day of school. And we're looking at a window of 1 to 3 p.m. for those students. That will also be a pickup for grade 7 and 8 students who are new to Hopkinton. So our grade 7 and 8 students who were here in Hopkinton last year already have their Chromebook. So that pickup will only be for students who move to Hopkinton over the summer. Is the curriculum the same regardless of remote or hybrid? And I already touched on this earlier, but I think it's worth repeating. Goals and objectives of classes are the same regardless of what teacher you have. Will there be after-school clubs? At this time, after-school clubs will not be happening in person. So we have a lot of clubs. It's one of the things that we think makes Hopkinton Middle School great, is that we have a lot of options, and every year we keep adding to our club list. But at this time, so that we can properly clean the school, we are saying that clubs will be done virtually. And so teachers will be communicating out, what clubs we offer will be done virtually. But at this time, those will not be done in person. All right, I'm going to pause there, and I'm going to ask Anne and Chris if there's anything that we want to answer from the question and answer session now.
this time, Mr. Keller, I think most of the questions have been answered. I just want to direct people to, there is an answered section in the Q&A. So if you posted a question, the answer might be there. We have dismissed some questions because they are going to be answered or have been already answered.
Thank you. All right, so at this time, we're going to turn our attention to special education, and I introduced him earlier, but I'd like to turn it over to Chris Ocampo, our assistant principal, one of our assistant principals.
Hi, everyone. So I'll just touch base about special education very quickly. Again, there are a lot of things that we're still trying to balance and figure out as the days progress, but we're hopefully getting there, and we'll get some answers as soon as we can. So the first thing I want to talk about is the delivery of IEP services. So the school will deliver all IEP services regardless of what track you have chosen for your student. And because of the drastic changes in the school year, how the services will be provided and the form that the service may be provided may be different in some cases. Each liaison will be reaching out to you to discuss those on an individual basis. The remote learning plans. So as students are transitioning to at-home learning, each student's remote learning plan will be tailored to meet the needs according to each IEP. As far as communication with families, we received a few questions about how the school is going to be communicating some of these changes for their special education students. So the learning specialist will actually be contacting those families over the next few weeks and definitely before school starts. We'll also be providing a resource document at some point for special education families that'll hopefully help them navigate what remote learning looks like, building some independence with that, and also providing some additional resources that can help bolster some of that remote learning time. As far as evaluations and reevaluations goes, we're hoping to conduct in-person evaluations in a safe manner, and that's kind of a top priority for us as a district. But in the event where evaluations has to be done remotely, the school will have a remote plan set in place to conduct those testings and to be able to ensure the validity of the tests and the accuracy of them. The IEP meetings, that's definitely a question that we're still trying to figure out. But as of right now, all the meetings will be taking place remotely as we're trying our best to limit the amount of people within the buildings and the visitors. So the team chairs will be working with each of the families individually to schedule those meetings.
Thanks, Chris. We're gonna I know that either Chris or Ann answered a question in the Q&A, and I don't know exactly if everybody can see the answered questions. Can they? All our participants? Well, anyway, I'll make this statement. So somebody asked if the deck will be posted online. So tomorrow we will email a recording of this presentation as well as the slide deck to all families so that you can view it as well as click on a couple of links that we have in here.
Mr. Keller, I think we can also make the questions and answers available. So we'll be sure to provide what the questions were and what we have answered, just in case you haven't seen them. Also, just to note that the questions are coming fast and furious. So we may miss a question if we've moved past, for example, special education. We will be sure to answer any lingering questions that didn't get addressed but are still important. We will send that out along with the slide deck.
Great, thank you. All right, next I want to turn to health and safety. As if you've been following along, whether it be looking at the district plan or going to the HCAM hangout hours, you know that students and staff will be required to wear masks. If you haven't been following along, let me tell you, students and staff will be required to wear masks. Students are going to be, the expectation is students will be washing their hands before they leave home, before they leave the classroom, before they eat, and before they touch their face. They will wash their hands after arrival to school, after they finish their lunch, after they use the bathroom, and after they arrive at home. We are purchasing lanyards for all students. So one of the things that's going to be different this year is the district has purchased student IDs that will have a barcode included on them. So students that are getting on the bus will have this ID that will be mailed home. My understanding is that will be mailed home before the first day of school. So bus drivers will scan the barcode. And so this all goes back to the ability to contact trace should there be a situation where we need to do contact tracing. Also, it allows us to have a hands-free, it allows us to prevent students from having to touch the pin pad in the cafeteria. If they're purchasing lunch from the cafeteria, they can just scan their ID using the barcode and not have to use the pin pad in the cafeteria. The other purpose for lanyards, we are going to be limiting the number of students who can enter a restroom at one time. And so before a student enters a restroom, they will take their lanyard off, place it on a hook outside the restroom, and there will only be so many hooks that outside the bathroom, and that will indicate what the capacity of that bathroom is. And so that is one of our approaches. One thing I think is worth mentioning, and this is one of the questions that came into us, is somebody who either went to school here or is a teacher in the building knows that there's a lot of hot and cold zones in the building. This is going to be especially important this year, in that we are going to have our windows open in classrooms. So it's going to be important for your child to come with layers. Our science classrooms tend to be on the colder side. So if a student is going to be assigned to a science classroom for his or her cohort, it's important to remember, and I have to keep reminding myself, that that child's going to be in that classroom all day long. So sometimes those classrooms can be really cold, and sometimes they can be very hot. And so layers are going to be particularly important. I am not an expert in health. So as I mentioned earlier, we are relying on our team and those people who are experts in that field. One of the things I just want to mention, I think it's worth saying tonight, is this concept of close contact. And I apologize for those of you that already are familiar with close contact, but that's how we're looking at this. So close contact is defined as contact within 6 feet for at least 10 to 15 minutes. So some of the questions have come in. My child is a 6th grade student and will be on the bus. And if somebody tests positive for COVID who is on that bus, and that person's a high school student, does that entire bus and the classes that they are in need to quarantine? So that is not the case. So what will happen is we will do contact tracing, and they will make decisions with the Department of Public Health will make decisions based on close contact. So I think it's really important to say this. I think that as parents, as educators, there probably are all times when we have said to a child, those of us who are parents, you're fine, you can go into school. It's going to be incredibly important this year that should your child show any signs, and I won't read all the bullet points on here, you're probably familiar with many of these things if you sent your child to camp or to a sport, that if your child has any of the following symptoms, that they stay home from school. We are in this together. Our success as a school and our ability to teach students depends on us all adhering to these pieces. Questions that came in regarding health and safety. Will buses be sanitized? They will. They will be sanitized after the AM run and after the PM run. How will face shields be distributed? So this was particular to students riding the bus. That is still being worked out. I spoke earlier tonight to Susan Rothermick. They are still working on the plan, and there's a meeting scheduled where we're going to work on that plan. So I apologize. This is one of those questions that I don't have a good answer for, but we will have details coming forward. Students will indeed have assigned seats on the bus. And I mentioned this earlier in the previous slide, that if a student on the bus tests positive, quarantining will be based on close contact. How do I report an absence for my child who is on the elected remote track? And you would do that the same as always. So just regardless of what track your child is in, if he or she is not participating in class, then you would report your child absence from school in the manner that you've always done so. And if you're a first-time parent at Hopkinton Middle School, that will come out in an email that we send to you about how to do so. All right, questions on health and safety, Chris and Anne, or any questions on special education that you might want to go back to?
A few questions about windows being open. And so I think that's going to be on a day-by-day basis. We're going to try to keep the windows open as much as we can. Of course, we're going to also try to ensure that our students are not uncomfortable in the classroom. So whether that means rain, snow, December, January, we don't have one answer for you. That windows will be open through February or will be closed on December 1st. We're really going to have to judge that on a day-by-day basis. Another question about students walking, entering the building and leaving the building. We will have staff in the hallways reminding students about social distancing requirements, but we're going to have to trust that you as parents have conversations with your students about their personal responsibility to do their best to remain socially distanced from their friends. We will do our best here at school to remind them, and we hope that you at home will have similar conversations to remind them about those expectations as well. I will say there are a lot of questions, and we promise if we don't get them answered live tonight, we will send you the answers.
I'm going to go to facilities. And so Anne talked about windows as came up in one of the questions, and we'll touch on that in facilities. So there will be an hourly cleaning of high touch points. So high touch points include light switches, door handles, and there will be a portering of the bathrooms. So the custodians will be going into all the bathrooms and cleaning and sanitizing. Every night, all desks will be wiped down by a custodian, and electrostatic spray will be used in each classroom and office. In the middle school, we have air handling units, which bring 100% outside air into the classrooms, gyms, auditorium, and common spaces. So if you know anything about air handling units or HVAC systems, you may know that there is the opportunity to vary how much outside air is coming in. Those have all been modified so that 100% of outside air is coming into the classroom. So to Anne's point a moment ago, and to my point earlier about dressing in layers, when you have that much outside air coming into the classroom, it does tend to be cooler. But obviously, I would assume you would know the reason to have those at 100% outside air. All classrooms where there will be students will have windows. So there are several classrooms at Hopkinton Middle School that do not have windows that we have used in the past. Those are not being used with students this year. So we will have windows open whenever possible. That is a goal to make sure that even if it's just a crack, to make sure that those windows are supplementing the outside air that's coming in from the air handling units. Water fountains will be off. So you hopefully noticed in the supply list that we've asked for 2 bottles brought to school each day. The intent was for those bottles to be filled with water. So we asked that students come with 2 filled bottles of water each day. They will not be able to fill them at our water fountains, as those will be turned off. Hand sanitizer will be available in each classroom and at all entry points to the school. We will have signage throughout the building, reminding students of 6 feet of distance, reminding them that masks are required. We're also putting tape in the hallway. If you've ever walked through the middle school or if you've been a student here, you know that our hallways are on the smaller side. So it is, that will be part of our job as educators, as administrators, to reminding students they need to stay to the right at all times and avoiding any crowds and crossing that center line. All right. So, one of the things, and I think I mentioned it in a later slide, and Anne just mentioned one of the questions, like, how can we help our child? I think one of the big things, and we have a webinar scheduled with students, and I've mentioned that in the email home, and I've gotten a couple emails from students, so thank you for doing that. But I think one of the important things is preparing them for what school will look like. And so you may have seen some snapshots of what the school may look like or what other schools may look like. And so I think that, it certainly is, I will say that Anne, Chris, and I, working with our custodians to set up the classrooms, it certainly has a very different feel. And so I think preparing students for what the classroom experience will be important for you as a parent. So here's an example of a classroom. This classroom has desks set up at 6 feet apart. We will be putting markings in each of the classrooms to make sure that those desks stay at 6 feet apart. Each teacher has a 6-foot spacing at the front of the room. I do want to go back to that first bullet point on there, which talks about students remaining in cohorts throughout the day. Again, those who are alumni, HMS parents, you know that at grades 7 and 8, we start foreign language, and we have 3 choices. They are Mandarin, Spanish, and French, and we also have math levels. So they have made, having those options for students have made our scheduling of our students very complicated. So there are going to be some exceptions to students remaining in cohorts. I will be communicating with those families when your child will be not in his or her cohort throughout the entire day. So I'm going to send that communication to parents who are impacted by that, making you aware of the fact that your child is in this cohort for all classes, but for math, he or she will be going to a different classroom to take his or her pre-algebra or accelerated algebra. Lunch will be in the brown gym. Students will be separated by cohort. They will have an assigned seat. So for instance, if you are in, let's say, a cohort of 12 students and you're in grade 8 and your homeroom teacher is Mrs. McLean, that cohort will be eating in the same area in the cafeteria every day, and a student will be eating in the same seat every day. There will be 15 minutes between each lunch. Students will be asked to clean their desk. So that would be cleaning of any food that might remain on it. And then custodians will come in those 15 minutes between each lunch and disinfect those spaces. All right. I'm going to pause there. And Chris, questions that we should address at this time on facilities?
There was a question about food being distributed in the cafeteria, and I think that's sort of a facilities. We will be offering hot food option and a cold food option, actually 2, one which would be a vegetarian option for students. And students will be pre-ordering, so there'll be a need to order your food. The order form would go out, let's say on Friday, and ordering will be closed by that Monday morning. And students would need to pre-order for the entire week. Delivery of that food will happen in the cafeteria. Our students are eating in the brown gym. So those students who have pre-purchased their lunch, whether it's hot, cold, or vegetarian option, would go to the cafeteria. Cold food options would be labeled and students would pick those up. Those would be out individually, and students for hot food would progress through the hot food line. So, and then they would exit the cafeteria and bring their meal into the brown gym.
Thank you. All right, Anne, I'm going to turn things over to you because the next slide is around schedule.
Okay, so our schedule for students in the hybrid and in the elected remote models, students will have classes following the schedule that you see here. So our homeroom would be 7:25 to 7:40 every day. So as students enter, they would go to their homeroom, and then we will see all 7 classes every day. And so if you are a student who comes to school on a green day track, you will have your classes. Academics are 45 minutes and related arts are also 45 minutes. We've worked in a 10-minute mask, snack, and activity break for each grade level. That varies. So what you're looking at is the time schedule for grade 6. Grade 7 and grade 8 varies from this time schedule in that the mask, snack, and activity break would be at a different time to ensure that we have enough outdoor spaces for all of our students to be outside and not be intermingling, as well as the lunch mask and break number 2 would also be different. Students will be eating lunch by grade level. And so 6th grade eats at 10:50, and then 7th grade and then 8th grade would eat at different times through the day. If your student is home and doing remote learning, their live classes would follow this schedule as well. And so students will see in PowerSchool what their A block class will be, and they will be responsible for, in the remote world, to access their Zoom links to attend those classes. Our students in school would remain in the classroom, and the teachers will be rotating through. So in walks their math teacher. At 8:25, the math teacher leaves, and then in walks their next academic teacher or related arts teacher. You will see that we have 2 cycle days. On cycle day 2, we start the day with their G block and we end the day with their A block. Every day starts with homeroom, every day ends with a Hiller block or a checkout. We feel that it's important for students to have a time to be organized, to ensure that they have everything they need, that they can check with their teachers, to ensure that they know what the expectation is for the next day. So our students who are coming into school hybrid and are here every other day will just have the last 20 minutes or 15 minutes to just ensure that they are all set for their next day when they're at home and responsible for their remote work without the access to the live teacher. The mask break will be outside along with the activity. We'll try to make sure that our students are moving. We'll try to ensure that there's enough distance between students, but they will be allowed, if they need a quick stretch or to get a drink of water, to access the bathroom as needed during the school day. I think that's good there, Mr. Keller.
Thanks, Ann. A question around QR codes. So the question is, can you talk about the QR codes? I thought kids could sit anywhere due to them. If not, can kids choose one friend to always sit next to? So that is actually, occurring at the high school. And the high school, and I don't want to get into what the high school is doing because I really want to focus on the middle school, but the high school, because of the nature of their schedule, students are not staying in cohorts. And so that's why they're using QR codes in the cafeteria to make contact tracing a little bit easier. It is our goal to keep students in cohorts. And so we're not mixing up. If we're doing that in the classrooms, it just makes sense to continue to do that in the cafeteria. Having said that, we are looking at QR codes as an option to utilize in a different capacity. All right. Next was a question on if the school or district must go remote due to COVID rates, will students' schedules be full day? And I believe Ann touched on that, but maybe I'm wrong.
I did not.
But the answer is yes. Our goal is to have a schedule that works in all three areas. So whether that's hybrid, remote, or if we actually were able to have all students come back at one time. So, those are the big topics I want to talk about. You've seen the supply list. And one thing that I want to emphasize that I did not talk about yet, and that is that each day students should be bringing 2 masks with him or her, and they should be in their own container. So when we take a mask break, as Ann talked about in the schedule a moment ago, students will wear their masks, and if the weather is nice, we'll be going outside for the mask break, and whenever possible, we'll be going outside. So student walking outside, and we're going to go over this with our students and with our teachers. He or she, once we get outside, will take the mask off, we'll sanitize, take the mask off, put the mask in, say, a plastic bag, close up that plastic bag, put it in his or her pocket. We'll take the mask break, we'll sanitize again on the way back into the school, take the mask out of the bag, put the mask back on, and then return to the classroom. So that is why we're talking about having 2 masks every day, and each mask in its own container that could be put into a student's pocket for when we go out for a mask break. I already talked about the 2 bottles filled with water, so I won't repeat that now. Other questions that came up that didn't neatly fit into a category for us. So, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier. How can I help prepare my child for this new normal? I think preparing them for the information that we have presented here tonight. Classrooms, I think, are going to look very different. Chris Ocampo actually did I guess a walkthrough is a good term for it, with 2 high school students and some community members and school committee a couple of weeks ago. And, the students talked about what the experience was like in the classroom. It certainly is very different. Obviously, there's going to be a lot less group work. There's going to be a lot less communicating. The students are going to be limited to their cohort in terms of their contact during the day. So preparing them for that so they are not shocked on day one. We're going to be doing a webinar just like this. We'll try and have a little more fun, I suppose, in it. And that's going to be on September 3rd, and that's at 1 o'clock. So encourage them to attend that. We've gotten a couple emails from students about that webinar. We would love to have them there and hear their questions. They've already submitted some great questions for us to prepare for that, but I think that is going to be really important. And we'll do the same thing. If your child cannot attend, we will send out that recording to them as well as to you so that you can prepare for that. Will there be tours of the school? We'd love to do that. We very much would, but unfortunately, we're not able to offer tours of the school. Will there be state tests this year? We're still awaiting information from the Department of Education on this. At this time, the commissioner has said that there will be state tests, but you know, that's, if you recall last year, we really waited until very near the end before that decision was made. So I believe that there's a commitment to making state tests happen, but you know, I don't know how realistic that will be based on kind of where we end up. I did have a question that came in late that I wasn't able to put in the presentation, or it wasn't that late, but I didn't get to put in the presentation. And that was with regards to trips. So I communicated earlier about Nature's Classroom, which is our grade 6 field trip. We have delayed that in the hopes that we'll be in a different place, because originally it was scheduled for December, I believe, Mrs. Ben-Bennick.
Yes.
And so we have now delayed that toward the spring. And our 8th grade trip, our New York City trip, I have sought and received approval from school committee. So at this time, we are still planning on having that trip in June for our 8th graders. But you know, as we move forward in the school year, we'll have more information about that. So that's kind of where we stand on class trips at this time. One additional thing I want to say before we see if there's any other questions and kind of go through the open questions that we have. If something comes to you, again, we'll send this slide deck to you tomorrow, but if something comes to you between now and then, that the Google form for submitting a question is still live, and ultimately we won't be able to answer it via a webinar, but we will, if you put your email address in there, we will respond to you, because I'm sure that there are a lot of questions. And if you're anything like us, as we uncover new things, more questions arise. And so we certainly understand that hearing this information might bring up new questions that you didn't previously have. Okay, Chris, Ann,
Yes.
Let's go through anything that we weren't able to touch on.
So there's a question about schedules for students on their remote day. And so we expect that students will follow the regular schedule. So if they're a green track student, you can see on the schedule, you will see that there's also, you know, the orange day. So on orange day, your student would be at home. They can follow that guideline, that schedule as a guideline for their day. There will be no expectation that they are in math class at 7:45 to 8:30. It's there as a guideline. We know that would help families with structure. So you can say to your child, this is your schedule, and you can help them to navigate, or they know that at 7:45 they have class, at 8:30 they have the next class, etc. But we also recognize that you as families, there might be several children at home who need to use the Zoom links, or someone needs to assist a younger sibling. You may have an appointment that your child, so the work can be done when it's convenient for your family, and the schedule is there to serve as a guideline. There may be times when a teacher will request that students collaborate through a Google Doc on an assignment during that class time, but there will be flexibility. Also, there's a question about reporting absences if your child is sick on their at-home day. So again, that we don't have an official reporting of absences for that situation, but if your child is unable to complete their work, it would be important to email the teacher so that the teacher is aware that the child was sick and was unable to complete the work that was expected for them to have been done on their at-home day.
I'm going to answer a couple questions that caught my attention here. And of course, these are no longer in an order of any sort, but so could some of the club meetings be done outside? That's certainly something that we will take a look at. Our goal at the end of the day, unfortunately, and I don't like saying this, is to have to be preparing the school for the next day. So in most cases, we're going to have students and staff who are departing the school at the end of the school day so that we can begin that extensive cleaning. And so problems arise if we did a club meeting outside and then the students had to come back into the building and we're waiting for a ride. So again, it's something we would love to do, and we'll see as we go through if we are able to do that. I failed to mention this earlier when we talked about computer pickup. So if you have a computer from last year, so your child is going to be in 6th grade and you borrowed a computer from Hopkins last year, does it have to be returned and exchanged? So yes, it does. So if your child is orange hybrid track, the plan is you will be picking up your new Chromebook on the 15th. And if you borrowed one, we'll bring it to us that day. If your child is green hybrid track or every day, your child will bring that borrowed Chromebook, if you did, on the first day of school, and we'll exchange that and receive the new Chromebook.
Students who are remote have academics and related arts every day. And so there was a question about, if we're remote, how do we know if we're orange or if we're green? So if your child is elected remote, they will have classes every day.
There's a question, it seems that I'm not aware of the on-site everyday track was an option of the survey. So that was not an option at the survey. That is something that we are extending to our high need students. So the Department of Education has indicated to all school districts that students who are special education or who are English language learners have the opportunity to attend school every day to attempt to close achievement gaps.
There's a question about whether our remote days will look similar to that from March to June, and no, they won't. So there's going to be a more robust schedule in place than what we had from March to June, where you might recall students had math every day at 9 o'clock and English every day, but only had 2 academics. So in this instance, the students for remote work, so fully remote, will be in classes from 7:30 until 1:50, just like our students who come to school for their in the hybrid model.
There's a contest to see who can answer the most questions. So Chris, you need to jump in at some point. So there's a question on your website. The reentry plan document indicates that families are being requested to self-quarantine for 14 days prior to the start of school. Can you elaborate, as both parents work? So that is a request from made from the district, from Dr. Kavanaugh, and that is to ensure that as much as possible, students are staying home and not traveling to other states, are not going to different camps. And so that is, I believe, as she has stated on the previous Hangout, that is not a hard quarantine, but a soft quarantine to limit exposure as much as possible.
The students go for it, Chris.
Sorry, Anne. So there are a few questions about sports, actually. And so as of right now, there were a few sports that were that had the green light to start at the high school. However, at the middle school, it's much different. So as of right now, there are no sports scheduled for the middle school.
Yeah, and so I'm going to jump in on that. So that's a conversation. So Dr. Kavanaugh, Rich Cormier, Evan Bishop, Susan Rothermick, Tim Person, and I were on a call earlier today. So that is still something that is being determined. Rich Cormier, I believe, is going to be at school committee at the upcoming school committee meeting, which I believe is on September 3rd, and talking about the plan as the district and seeking school committee's approval for sports. As information is coming out from MIAA and different organizations, that's impacting how we approach sports, both at the middle school and the high school level.
Supply lists may look different for remote students, and so teams will be giving parents information regarding supply lists. What is being sent out now would be considered necessities, whether you're remote or whether you're hybrid, and then each team will communicate with families if there's something that might be different in addition to the general supply list that has already been made available.
And so we've had those conversations as educators about the supply list, and the teachers who are teaching remote believe that things on there will be utilized for all students. And as Anne just said, those additional requests, and I don't know if I said this earlier, but we are also planning a pickup day for students who are remote learners to pick up materials that they will need at home.
On the first day of school, students will come in and we will dismiss them from one location to their classrooms. And so there was a question about how will students know where those classrooms are. So specifically for 6th graders, they will be dismissed on their first in-school day from the Brown gym with their teacher, who will take them, with their homeroom teacher, who will take them to their classroom and ensure that they know where they're going. And that would hold true for 7th and 8th graders who might be new to the building and don't know where their classroom is. We'll ensure that we have plenty of staff to direct them to the classroom locations.
There's a question, if you're a hybrid student, isn't it a requirement for them to have homework on their home days? I'm concerned that students will not have enough schoolwork to do on their days off. So it is not a requirement to do homework, just as it has not been when we were pre-COVID. So ultimately, teachers will be providing work. So say I'm an English teacher and I'm seeing a student on the in-school day and we're doing work in the classroom. What he or she does on the at-home day, so I'm intentionally not using the word homework on that, because that is the work that they will be doing that will be moving the curriculum forward. So the teacher might say, you know, for tomorrow, you're going to read the next 25 pages of this novel, or you're going to begin your essay on compare and contrast. But the goal is to be moving the curriculum forward and doing so in such a way that impacts the curriculum. Or it might be, I'm going to record myself as a teacher giving a lecture on this thing that ordinarily I would do in person, but instead students are going to view this at home. And then tomorrow when they come in person, we're going to do work together as a class.
There are a few questions about hand sanitizer and just cleaning products in general. So the school will be providing wipes and as well as stations for hand sanitizing, especially within the classrooms and at the entrances and exits. And there was a question about if my child should or can bring their own hand sanitizer. We definitely won't confiscate anything. That's definitely encouraged. However, we'll just ensure that we will have cleaning products at hand within the school.
Question from a 7th grader coming to us from a parent who is hybrid. On his home learning days, is his start time flexible? It is flexible. And so, you know, I think there are some families that, and some students for whom consistency is important. And so that schedule, you know, children can follow that schedule along. Say I have English first, science, social studies, and go through the schedule. But when he is home, he can do his or her work at the time that most fits into his and your lifestyle. We have a question on how will children walking in and out of school be managed for safe spacing so there isn't crowding getting in and out of the doorway. So that's essentially what we're attempting to do in terms of having staggered times for entry. So what we have found in the past is that students entering, being dropped off, or walkers or bikers tend to not all come in at one time, but instead come in staggered. So we're going to be reminding students outside and inside. Hopefully we ask for your help at home in order to do that. And the same with dismissal. And it is going to be required that students have their masks on at all times. So we're attempting to always maintain those social distances, and hopefully your children have been in practice of doing that.
There was a question about students receiving help from teachers on their at-home days. We're still working through how this would work, but we're hoping to offer some drop-in staff support. It might not be with your child's teachers, but it might be with a math teacher or an English teacher who could provide if your child had some questions about an assignment. So we're still working through what that will look like. Unfortunately, because teachers will be live in class with a new group in class when your child is at home, you won't have the same access to those teachers, but we're hoping to provide some kind of support for your child on their at-home days.
Will these tracks remain throughout the school year, even if the COVID situation changes? No, they won't necessarily. I mean, we will be monitoring along with the state, along with the Department of Public Health. And so if things change, if there's a vaccine, if, there's a lot of factors that can change that could lead us to the point of saying all students are going to come in the building every single day, and then we'll have to look very differently at how we do this. Maybe it's the pessimist in me. I don't necessarily foresee that happening, but I'm certainly hopeful that we could get to a point where we would be in that place.
We have Remote students, there's a question about remote students being taught by the same teachers who teach hybrid. So most of our teachers are teaching some remote and some hybrid sections. We have some teachers who are teaching more remote sections than others. But if your child is remote and you at some point in time in the year elect to become hybrid, your child may get a different teacher based on how our scheduling works out. Same thing as if your child is hybrid and at some point you choose to go remote, there is a distinct possibility that your child will be getting a different teacher or set of teachers because of that change.
Will there be an option to have kids eat outside? Unfortunately, no. As much as we would love to do that, we don't have the staffing in order to supervise students. And so that unfortunately is not an option. If a student has to stay home because of symptoms, can he or she join remotely? The answer to that is no. So a student staying home because of a symptom of some sort will be treated as just as he or she normally would if they were missing school because of an illness of some sort, a pre-COVID illness.
There's a question about extra support for students based on high level of anxiety or uncertainty with the feeling towards the pandemic. So we've, as a staff, have talked extensively about the need for social emotional support. So we're definitely exploring those options, and we understand that it's definitely something that we need to address.
We have requested towels on the supply list for outside. So if teachers choose to take classes outside for class or during the mask break, we're suggesting that they bring a towel so they can put the towel down to sit on outside. That is the 100% reason for a towel. And so if your child doesn't want to bring a towel in for that, that is not a problem.
Are students permitted to drink water in the classroom? Yes, they are. So they are allowed, you know, obviously, that's one of the things we'll go over with students, but they will take their mask off, take a drink of water, and put their mask back down. Related to masks, I'm sorry, Mrs. Benbenek, if when outside is not available for a mask break, where will they go? So that's one of the things we're working on as a staff, but there are a variety of places that a student would be able to go, whether that be into one of the gyms, into the cafeteria, or into a different space that has a larger capacity, and that will have to be staggered.
Students will be allowed to bring their own lunch or pre-order their lunch. It's whatever your family is best for your family and for your child. Physical education, there was a request to clarify that. So our PE teachers will be going to the classrooms. They will have the opportunity then to take the cohort to an additional space. So it might be the Doyle gym or it might be outdoors, and they will determine based on what that activity, or they may remain in the classroom based on what the lesson and activity that they have planned. Students will not be changing for PE class.
Question on masks. Do students wear one to school with an empty bag and then bring a second one? Yes, so we would want students to have at least 2 masks each and every day.
There's a clarifying question about families with special education students and communication. So the concern was not knowing what the student schedule will be on an everyday basis at the start of the school year. Yes, we will have learning specialists reach out to you prior to the school year, so you're able to prepare and have enough time to be ready for the first day of school.
Teachers will be wearing masks in school, just as we expect our students to. We expect all of our staff to also be wearing masks. I've gotten used to it here at school, and we hope that our students and our teachers will also get more used to it, but that is a requirement of everyone while in our school building, unless they're in an individual personal space. But when we're around others, we wear our masks. We have 64 questions right now, so we're just trying to weed through those.
So Anne, there's a question here. Will kids be able to buy water at lunch? I assume the answer to that is yes, correct?
Yes, we're working through how that will happen. Again, we expect that it will be pre-ordering, so there will be an option to just pre-order water and pre-order milk. So if your child brings their meal from home, they can get just the beverage. Still working through the lunch logistics.
So a question about the nurses' facilities. So, so each school will have its nurse's office, as it always has, and then there will be a medical waiting room that will be for a student who is experiencing or demonstrating or potentially displaying COVID symptoms. So students, the nurse experience will look very different this year, in that a student, what's going to be really important that we communicate with our students is they can no longer go down to the nurse's office for a cough drop, for a Band-Aid, or what have you. Those things aren't going to be available in the nurse's office as they have in the past. And so when a student needs to see the nurse, the classroom teacher will call down to the nurse's office and say that this student is going down to the nurse's office. One of the nurses will meet that student in the hallway, make a diagnosis of that student, and if he or she is showing symptoms of COVID, will then be taken to the medical waiting room for an assessment.
There's quite a few questions around curriculum, about science labs, about where we're starting in our curriculum. And our teachers have worked diligently at the end of last year, but also at the beginning of this year, to ensure that all of our learning activities are meaningful and are meeting where our students are at. So we recognize that last year we did not get through every piece of the curriculum that we would have if we were all in school. And what teachers did in the spring was they taught what we deem to be essential. And so as we start the beginning of this year, we recognize that students may not have covered every topic or every skill that they would have had we been in school in a traditional school year. And so they will be doing whatever it is necessary to ensure that we are getting caught up to the skill level that we need to be at. So we're not expecting that even though they weren't in school, we're starting the same place that we start every year. We need to meet our students where they're at, and we need to bring them along at the pace that's necessary. So there's going to be adjustments, and our teachers have already been collaborating to ensure that we know where that is and where our students are at.
There's a question regarding our start room, which I attempted to type the answer, but I checked the wrong button. So I'm going to answer it live so I don't dismiss it. So our start room is a short-term transition program. And yes, that will be open for students. Question regarding grades, and I think Chris mentioned this earlier, how quickly will grades and updates within PowerSchool be viewable for students and parents? Again, I want to keep going back to we're attempting to make this school year as much as possible look like previous school years. So teachers, over the years have worked really hard to make sure that grades are updated in PowerSchool so that students and parents can see that information as quickly as possible.
A few questions about after school, and I think Mr. Ocampo might have answered this a little bit. At this time, we will send you a list of all of our after school clubs and activities and what the schedule is as teachers determine what is going to work best for their club. So at this time, I'm not sure if there's an after school band club or if some of our groups will be meeting as they have in the past, but we will be sure that we get that information out to students and to parents once we've settled into the school year and clubs begin again.
There's a couple questions about cleaner in terms of how the buses will be sanitized and specifically what types of products. I don't have the answers on those. I'm going to make note of that and see where we are in terms of buildings and grounds and if we can get that information.
There's a question about students walking home together. And again, this is a conversation that you need to have with your child's friends, your child's friends' parents and family. We can do what we can do here at school and when our students are on property and in our building. But if your child chooses to walk home and to go downtown, unfortunately, that's not something that we will be able to enforce or ensure. And so we hope that your child understands the importance of social distancing and maintaining appropriate space, keeping their mask on. But unfortunately, as far as school goes, we'll do our best here on school property and within the school building. But if your child's walking downtown or to the common, that's going to be something that you will need to have a conversation with your child and their friends and those friends' families. We will be monitoring hallways. We will be in the hallways when students are passing for mask breaks, when they're going to lunch and going from lunch, and for arrival and dismissal. And we will be enforcing the masks on and the social distancing guidelines.
Will hybrid students have to take their Chromebooks home? Yes. So again, I'm going to point back to, the way things always operated. So the expectation of middle school students is that their Chromebooks go back and forth between home and school. And this kind of relates to another question that's in here. What will students be doing on their at-home day? So I attempted to answer this earlier, but I will attempt to do a better job now. Students will be doing a variety of things, right? So if they're in person, I'm thinking like an English teacher, as I was, on an at-home day, I might record myself giving an introduction to a novel that we're reading. And so that students on their at-home day can take a look at that, can understand a little bit about that. And then on their in-school day, and then they also might be reading several pages in that book. And then when they come in that day, we're going to have a conversation, a discussion about that piece, and they might start their writing piece. So they won't be doing, I don't want to say the word homework, because homework traditionally has been practicing the skill that students learned that day. Our goal on their at-home day is moving the curriculum forward. And so as educators, we're having to think very creatively and critically about how students can function and work in that space, so that it's not just necessarily the traditional homework. We're also utilizing and beginning to use Schoology. So in the past, we used Google Classroom for organizing our curriculum and for having students be organizing. We're using Schoology, which interfaces with PowerSchool. And so that is a system that allows us to more easily interface with both worlds.
There are questions around grading and about assessing and having checkpoints to ensure that our students are learning. There won't be any significant differences to grading for hybrid versus remote students. Of course, those teachers will have to employ different assessment practices. There, might be in-school tests, whereas that might not be a mode that a remote teacher is utilizing with their fully remote students. Also, our teachers are well versed in assessing. That's what we do all the time, is we do daily assessments. Did students understand the lesson I delivered today? We do check-ins at the beginning of class. Did they retain what I taught them yesterday? And so our teachers will most certainly be doing check-ins and assessments, whether your child is in school or at home, and will be making adjustments to the curriculum and to their mode of delivery. What I will say, though, is that if your student is hybrid, they will most likely not have live access to their teacher on their at-home day, because those teachers are then live with a new group of students. So there was one specific question about that, and I don't anticipate that that will change. But of course, how a teacher delivers for that at-home day will change based on the checkpoints and the assessments that they're doing along the way.
It's a question about science and lab-based activities. It's how are the remote students going to participate in them? This is very much teacher-based. So our teachers have been working diligently to come up with some creative ideas on how to really reach students within their curriculum. At home, they're really looking into Schoology as a strong platform to be able to deliver that instruction. Just ensure that the teachers have been really working hard at home to figure out how to be able to do this in a constructive and effective way.
Forgotten items, families will not be able to drop off forgotten items. So if your child has forgotten their lunch, we will ensure that they get a lunch here at school. But unfortunately, we're trying to limit the contact for people coming in the building. And so if your child has forgotten their homework or their child has forgotten their lunch, you will not be able to drop that off.
Yeah, an important thing, and I wanted to mention that as well. So visitors and guests will not be allowed into the building. And as difficult as that is to not greet people, we hope you can understand the reason for doing that. So we had a closing of 7:15. So I'm going to ask Ann and Chris if there's any kind of last minute things in here that we want to touch on. We recognize that there's a lot of questions at present. There's 31 that we have yet to answer. And we will get a copy of these questions that have not been answered and do our best to get back to the person that asked them or post them in a document that we will send out to families later. Chris or Ann, anything that you were dying to answer before we close?
Not dying to answer, but just want to ensure you that as a team and as a school, we're all really doing our best to make sure that our students, whether they're in school or whether they're fully remote, have the best experience that they can in this current situation. And so we miss seeing your kids, and we're going to miss seeing their smiling faces in person. But I hope that you trust us and that we are doing what we can to ensure that this is the best experience for all of us.
I agree with everything that Ann said. And I just want to say that I'm just being in Hopkinton and being a new person and just seeing the work that that they've been doing and that we've been doing over the last few weeks. It's really been a humbling experience and kind of an eye-opening experience because I've been just so impressed with really the work that they've been really putting in to really ensure that we have a good start of the school year, regardless of what it looks like. So, so I'm excited to be here, and I'm looking forward to meeting all your students in the future.
Yeah, just wait till you get to meet them, Chris. If you're impressed before meeting them, you'll certainly be impressed once they arrive to school or you have an opportunity to meet them remotely. So I want to thank all of you. I want to say, I know there's a lot in my inbox, not related to the webinar, but emails that I've received from parents. I apologize. My return rate has been a little slower than usual, but my goal is to get back to everybody by the end of the day tomorrow that has kind of a lingering question out there. I want to thank you for your time tonight. I hope you found this informative and beneficial. Like I said, tomorrow we will send out a recording of this webinar as well as the slide deck. And in the coming week, we will do everything we can to get these open questions answered and be able to put together a document that we can share with you in that. So thank you so much for your time. It was much appreciated. Obviously, we're not getting to see your faces, but we are appreciative of the comments that I've seen in the Q&A of being thankful of our time. It's certainly, you know, it's certainly something we wanted to have a lot more definitive answers tonight, but we're still working through this, and we do appreciate any patience that you're extending to us. So thank you very much and have a wonderful night.